And we're live. Hello. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Pontificating with Pete on Generational Change. And it is Thursday, 9:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And so we are going to have ourselves quite a fun show tonight, I have no doubt. Hope you're all doing well. We've got a lot to cover, and I thought I was going to address a number of issues, and I will. But one thing that's very important that I must mention is that I just came, the reason why this show started, a little later than we normally would get things underway, is because I was just at a community association meeting in Hollywood, Florida, in a neighborhood that needs a lot of help. And the guest speaker for the evening was none other than Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And needless to say, the message that she was putting out there was, pretty crappy because it was dishonest, among other things. And so, you got to sit through a lot of this garbage. I do it because I'm trying to help spread the word about Jen, which is very important. I think we can all agree that that's, just sort of par for the course right now. The message is more important than anything else. What exactly are we preaching to our local communities about what we can do and what we can't do? I don't want to get too knee deep into it right now. I will get into it later this evening. So just keep in mind that that's going to be a topic of discussion. But let's just say that Debbie has, she's very loose with the truth when it comes to things like reparations, especially when people in desperate communities are asking about how they could be helped. So needless to say, that's not something that, we see coming, down the pike anytime soon. So we're just waiting on our friend, Yuh Line-Niou, who was on our podcast previously. This was, when she was a candidate, and this is going back to, I want to say it was in 22. I'm pretty sure that was when she was running for the U.S. Congress, the special election that came up in District 10. We all know how that went down. It was very ugly. Having a problem using Chrome. Double K, we love you. Thank you for checking in. As I've said before, the only thing that's really going to save the Democrats, if they can be saved, I don't think they can, is labor. It's the only thing they can really hang their hat on. But one thing that the Donald decided to talk about over the weekend, which is very interesting, is he's not going to tip. That's something I'll talk about real quick before Yuh Line-Niou comes on. Is that an issue? When everybody's talking about, thank you very much, Tony. It really means a lot. When Trump did his rally in the scorching heat over the weekend, they all wanted to point out that he was saying, first of all, they were saying that, he's saying, I don't care about your vote. No, he was actually pointing at one person in the audience. And did that person have some type of a sign? My guess is that they probably did. And, it's a free country. If you want to come and rally against Trump, you have every right to do so. So anyone who is questioning what his motivations were, I wouldn't get too caught up in something like that. However, what I do think is very important here, and this is something to keep in mind, Trump said if he gets elected president again, that he is going to eliminate taxing tipped wage workers. Now, on paper, that sounds great, and I'm totally for that. But the fact of the matter is, the reason why workers generally have to work off of tips is because their pay is so dreadfully low. And so the companies basically skirt by paying a real slave wage. In most cases, I think tipped workers are still only getting $2.13 an hour, which of course is nothing. You basically claim, you claim all of it, so you don't, whatever you reduce your taxes in. You're not actually making money off of that. You're making money off of your tips, and that's how you get paid. I didn't say that he doesn't tip. I don't know what you're talking about. You're making that's totally fake news, Metal. So you're just making stuff up now. I never said that. No, what I'm saying is he does not want tipped workers to get tipped to get taxed. And I agree with that. It is, like I said, it's kind of ridiculous that that is even a thing. But ultimately, what should happen is that we should have a living wage in this country. And so tipping ultimately should be optional based on the level of service that you provide, rather than thinking that a person just naturally has to be tipped. And I've been a tipped worker. I've worked in the service industry for several years. So you're hearing it from somebody who's actually done it, not somebody who's just standing on a soapbox. And I can say without question that the biggest reason that this is an issue is because companies don't want to pay. They rely on the customers to basically pay for their workers. That's a big part of the problem. And so if we were to have a living wage, this would no longer be an issue, and it shouldn't be. There is no question that that is something, we definitely want to avoid in the future. But without question, Donald Trump making a statement that's going to resonate, as it should, because again, the working class keeps taking it on the chin. And of course, it's campaign season. So this is when everybody pretends to care about workers. I'll believe it when I see it if he were to get in there again and say, okay, we're totally taking out this taxation on tipped workers. It's totally not happening. And yes, Double K is absolutely right. If you do tip in cash. Do not tip on the bill. Do not put it on the grid. I'm sorry, but while people may not like that, the government does not care about you. And until we have a government that is of, by, and for the people, that's going to be a problem. So will he, won't he? I don't know. I just know that the takeaways from what he was saying over the weekend, the only thing that the Democratic side wants to talk about relating to Trump's rally is whether or not he said that I don't care about your vote. Well, look, do I think he really does? No, I don't. I think he's like anybody else. That's like saying, does anybody truly in the political arena care about one's vote? I, for one, believe that most, if not the overwhelming majority of our elected representatives, especially at well, you know what, it really doesn't matter. And again, Yuh Line, for example, is in New York City, and whether you're at the local level, either the state level or at the federal level, we do have a real problem with representatives in this country who are really answering to the people. That's the big problem, and that's why I'm still a huge advocate for her work, and why I wish she was the person sitting in the United States Congress right now instead of Dan Goldman. But that's a whole other story. So at the end of the day, what we're trying to do here is turn politics into service, and those are the types of people that we need in these offices. And if we get that, then I think real change could probably happen here in the United States. But right now, there is a huge primary coming up exactly 2 weeks from tomorrow. Cannot emphasize enough how important this federal race is in particular, because of the amount of time, effort, and money the Israel lobby, in particular AIPAC, is throwing into the New York Congressional 16 race between incumbent Jamaal Bowman, who is a friend, and obviously George Latimer. We should just call him Challenger. That's really all it is. His name doesn't really matter. But with that said, somebody who was a great state assemblywoman, hopefully we'll find out what her plans are going forward. She is definitely the embodiment of the type of true progressive that politics really needs right now. Yuh Line-Niou, welcome back to Generational Change. And this is Pontificating with Pete with Generational Change.
Hi, Pete.
It's great to see you, my friend. How's everything going in the big bad apple?
It's been good. I wouldn't say it's good. I think that there's a lot of challenges right now. I would say that, it's been interesting. There's a lot of things happening, and I wish that they were different. I think that there's a lot of hope, but there's also a lot of, changes that we need to see happening. Obviously, I've been making a lot of phone calls. I've been making a lot of, calls, knocks, and trying to get out there with my friends, and I've been hopefully getting a lot of people inspired to go and help out with certain races. And you talked about a little bit what's going on in New York. So
one of the advantages that you have that we don't have down here in the hot Florida suburbs is, with everything being easily accessible, obviously there are issues with the New York transit system, no question about it, but being able to get from point A to point B relatively easily and get into these neighborhoods that, really need boots on the ground. I would imagine that in particular, the primary race in the 16th district while there obviously is a considerable chunk of it that is in the Westchester suburbs, there's also a nice chunk of it that is also in the city limits. And my guess is that like most of these types of races, even though Representative Bowman does have the incumbent advantage, this is still a race that has an ungodly amount of corporate money that is being thrown into it.
I don't think I've ever seen a race actually have this much money put into it. Actually,
I think this will set records for a congressional race. I agree. I think it probably will. And while that may matter, and they're going to plaster the airwaves as they've been doing, and that's basically been Latimer's focus as a campaign, I am fairly confident in saying that in terms of a ground game, it's probably safely in Bowman's corner. How has that been materializing? Because again, we can't watch everything on social media. Not everybody's in the New York City area. So what's the ground game looking like right now as we hit the home stretch?
Yeah, so I think that, I have so much of my team up there right now, the folks that came out for me. I have to give a lot of props to the young people. They are doing a great job of mobilizing folks on the ground. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of door knocks happening every single day. People are talking, and I think that the important part is the outreach, right? Like, we have seen that ground game can really make the difference. I mean, with my race, we saw a huge, monetary discrepancy as well. The funding, I could not beat that, amount of, self-funding in that race. And I will say that, what really made a difference, I think, was my ground game. And I don't think anybody could ever say that, ground game can't make up for, and enthusiasm from your community can't make up for, the kind of overspending and outspending that somebody else can have in your race. So,
I could not agree more.
Yeah, Jamaal is absolutely 100% winning the ground game.
Yeah, I think the same is true. And this goes for anybody who's running for office. Obviously, about Jen's race against Wasserman Schultz and any other of these races that are going on in the country right now. I know a lot of people feel there's a couple of things that I think are happening, and I'm sure you've seen it. Voter apathy is a very big problem. There's a lot of people that have given up on the electoral process for a multitude of reasons. And even though generally speaking, I think the consensus has always been that they'll forget about it in a few days. We'll do what we do now, and they'll be mad at us for a little while, but then eventually we'll get back to the way things are. I don't think so. I think that there has been a real precedent that's been set over the past several months, probably even the last few years, where people are really turning away from electoral politics, even in a place like New York City. How do you fight back against that voter apathy that clearly you guys have to be hearing on the ground?
I think that you hit the nail on the head on that, in the sense that, people believe that voters somehow have short-term memories and they kind of count on it, which I think is a really horrible thing to do. Our voters are smart. Our voters are educated. They're ready to, really kind of challenge the establishment kind of thinking of like, this is the way it's always been done, or like whatever. I think that people really want, especially this generation of young people who are the voters who really kind of, I will say, federal, race for president, was the ones who came out, like, saved us really. And I think that, what we're seeing is that this generation is not happy with just getting the same old, and we'll do better next time. And, it's just not gonna, it's not swaying their heart. I think that what really needs to happen is that they have, people that they really want to support. I think that we're seeing that on the ground with Jamaal's race. We're seeing that on the ground with, we saw it with Summer Lee's. I think that it's really important that we're actually mobilizing people and showing folks that, like, our races matter, right? And I think that, that's like the big thing. Like, we cannot be Republican light, and we cannot be better than, just like, we're better than the Republicans, so choose us. Like, it has to be that we have a plan. We are here to actually work and mobilize for you. We are here to give new and fresh ideas. Like, I think that's what people want, and that's why, progressives have still been winning. But I also think that it is hard. It is hard on certain races to get people to come out.
I agree 100%. We're even having trouble with our own race, but Jen's obviously done a really good job on a multitude of fronts. And of course, I am willing to slave myself in the Florida sun because I believe in her that much. And I know that you believe in Jamaal just as well. There obviously has been a very significant, we have to talk about it, there's been a very significant wrinkle that's been thrown into this race. It's one thing to do what I perceive Mondaire Jones had done when you were running in the open primary seat back in 22. And what ultimately I think ended up happening, again, everyone could point the finger whatever direction they want, but it became pretty clear as the race was winding down that it was basically between you and current Representative Goldman, that was who ultimately was going to win this wide open primary race. And it became pretty clear once you basically opened up a 10-point lead over Mondaire Jones that it probably, for anyone who is in the progressive movement and obviously wants to advance what AOC has currently established in the Bronx and Queens throughout the city and have another representative who is not bought and paid for in a major cityscape like yours within that political system, to have that voice to combat the likes of Richie Torres and Hakeem Jeffries, for that to happen and for him to do what he did is one thing, but not having any short-term memory, now he's gotten himself back into the political race. I don't know how many people know that he's actually running for Congress again, but now he has decided that he's going to endorse George Latimer over Jamaal Bowman. Now, for me, that is such a betrayal on so many levels. I mean, it's one thing not to even support Jamaal. I listen, some people just don't want to get involved because they're thinking about their future and my personal aspirations. What would ever motivate somebody to come out and endorse a candidate like that who has been so vitriolic in so many ways, and that only makes you look like somebody who's just being totally opportunistic? How do you peel the onion back that is the current odyssey that is Mondaire Jones?
I will not, try to peel that back because I have no idea what's going on in his political calculations here or in his thinking or what he's feeling right now. I think that, in my mind, though, I think that, I asked him the same thing. I was just like, why did you could have just chosen to do nothing, you could have just said, I'm focusing on my race and just like not done anything, but I think that, I can't speak for him and I can't speak for why or his motivations for doing something. But I will say that, for the Working Families Party, for folks who know how we all like to, vote together, I think it's really important to get the endorsement from the Working Families Party. I was really proud of mine. I think that, to get the Working Families Party endorsement and to get, progressive support for your race, we try to make sure that we vote as a block. We also try to, get folks out to support one another. I think that as candidates who are also, endorsed by, same folks, et cetera, like, I think that it's really important that we tend to have a ability to support one another. Everybody knows it's hard, especially if you're people of color, like, it's hard to raise money, it's hard to get support, it's hard to be like getting enough people on the ground, et cetera, like, unless you inspire them together, right? It's all about a movement. It's about building the coalition. It's about building together. And I think that in this sense, like, it was a really huge betrayal to all of us. I think that I was really surprised. I mean, and even still, I will say, still people should vote for him because we still need to try to get our Democratic majority back. I still, as people say, it's really important to make sure that we still get our Democratic majority back, that we, are able to, fight Republicans on some of the issues, especially like women's rights and climate justice that are on the table right now. And I think I'm always thinking about trying to make sure that we can get what we can, but I am very disappointed.
Well, I'm going to have to push back on you slightly. And what I mean by that is I think there comes a point where you really have to ask yourself. It's kind of like the same situation we're facing with right now. You're in a blue state, I'm in a red state, so it isn't as consequential as it will be in places like, obviously Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, Nevada, possibly Georgia and North Carolina, where the presidential election will ultimately be determined and there is no question that the current president is aiding and abetting a genocide as we speak.
Yeah.
And so you look around and you say, well, are they just using President Trump or former President Trump as a political football so they can get away with what they're getting away with? And the same rule would apply with somebody like Mondaire Jones, who's saying, hey, I'll be the crappiest Democrat on the face of the planet, but you got to vote for me against the Republican. And so it's this whole, like, when do we take a stand and say, we're not, listen, we have principles, we have to stick to them. Otherwise, what's the point? It's the same thing. And we're going to get into it later in the show regarding John Fetterman and his interview with Bill Maher. It's like, when do we actually say, no, you know what? We are progressive, we are non-corporate, and we're not going to be taken advantage of like this. We have to show people that our vote actually matters. And if you don't value it, we will withhold it. And then you'll pay the political price for it. At what point does that even come into the conversation, if at all, for that matter?
Well, I think it matters, especially during primaries and things like that. I think that, obviously, if we can win some of those seats out in Florida, if we can win some of the other seats to make sure that, the Democratic majority doesn't depend on New York or like run through New York, then, obviously we can lighten that load, but I also think that, and we can hold people's feet to the fire a little bit more, and I think that, when so much doesn't depend on it, I think that's for sure. We definitely have flipped a lot of seats. Like, I mean, you saw the blue wave everywhere in America, right? We saw, like, even in Michigan, like we saw, there was for the first time in like almost like a whole generation and a half, they finally have a Senate majority. So I think that it's really important to see how the shifts have been, and yet, like in New York, like somehow in our very, very, very blue state, we were the ones who lost the majority for our House, and I think that, I mean, not for nothing, we definitely had certain races like the one that Mondaire gave up on, and that really kind of depended, we really needed to win those, right? We needed to win those seats. And I think that made it so that was a huge shift, and people made those decisions. And those decisions, I think, when it comes to Jay Jacobs and some of the history there, whether or not we actually fought really enough for the Democrats, the Democratic seats, and whether or not, Democrats as a whole, I will say that in our state, the establishment Democrats would rather have Republicans than progressive Democrats. And that's where I think the biggest harm is.
Well, I would definitely say if there is a pinpoint piece of legislation that you are very familiar with that I think would have completely solidified the populist left progressive movement in the state of New York, of course, is the New York Health Act. We all know that there are a couple of representatives who are, I mean, listen, it's like anything. If it's not Kirsten Sinema, it's John Fetterman. If it was Joe Manchin, and so on and so forth, there's always going to be somebody who's going to stand in the way of the actual legislation to come through, because the truth is, it's easy to say that you support a legislative piece and then actually actively fight for it. And that is something that you have done. Somebody like your former colleague, amazing activist in New York as well. You got a couple of them. You've got Jabari Brisport, who's obviously done an amazing job. And Senator Rivera, I believe is his name, from New York, from the Bronx as well. Gustavo is an amazing guy. And so, it's great that fight is happening, but I also see where that shift in terms of like, well, look, if the Democrats ain't going to help me, I mean, what the hell? I mean, that happened with a lot of people voting for, Zellman against Hochul. So without further ado, we're going to have to ask, what is your plan? Because clearly you've got to have something in the works, or something you're at least thinking about. And on top of that, the mental fortitude it takes to run for office multiple times, it is such a stressful experience to do. But I would imagine that there is at least something that you're potentially thinking about doing. I'm not saying you have to go run for governor, but hey, you never know. If that's a good idea. What are you thinking about potentially doing in the near future?
Well, right now, I'm thinking about trying to make sure that we can get as many of our progressives elected. I know that's like such a,
No, it's true. I mean, yeah, that's what's in front of us right now.
Yeah, I'm working my butt off trying to make sure that my colleagues who are amazing progressives, who have stood up, like you said, who have fought hard for the things that we wanted to see changed for a long time. I mean, I don't think that this is something that we are able to stress enough. But there are pieces of legislation that would never have even been written, never have been brought up, never have been considered, that are now considered mainstream pieces of legislation and part of our life, right? The law, right? So I think that it's really important for us to recognize the housing bills that we were able to pass through, right? The rental regulations that we were able to pass through, the sexual harassment in the workplace legislation that we were able to pass
That's
through.
a big one.
These are huge things that we wouldn't have even gotten if we didn't have that amazing progressive group of legislators in 2019, like be able to pass all of these things. We were able to, codify women's rights. We were able to do so many different amazing things. We were finally able to pass the Child Victims Act, things like that. Decades had gone by without anybody passing certain things or looking at certain things. And it was really important for us to be able to do that. And we need to make sure that we keep a lot of these progressives in office. And that's what I'm working for. I'm trying to make sure that my colleagues can stay in office, that were really kind of pivotal in making those things happen, right? The policies that we desperately need. Like for myself, I often say this, and this is what happened a lot in the legislature. If I write a bill, I don't necessarily keep it to myself. I give it away a lot of times because I think that, what needs to happen is those bills need to pass. And I only get a certain number, right? And I think that it's really important that we pass those things. The credit's not important. What's important is that we actually have the policies that change our everyday lives.
You are 1,000% correct about that. That is a huge problem in politics, as I'm sure you experienced up in Albany. There are a lot of egos as big as the Empire State Building. And for somebody who is as selfless as you are, this is what I try to stress to people, especially because one thing that I emphasize on this podcast constantly is the fact that progressives and libertarians have a lot of crossover, even though there are diametric differences in terms of economic philosophy. There is a lot of crossover, and a lot of times people just want to find reasons to not get along, to not break bread, and to not get these policies through. And what you end up with is that gridlock that is so bad. And then it becomes this whole, well, I don't want to support Yuh Line-Niou's bill, but I'll support so-and-so's bill. And so, like you said, if they're the one that has to get the credit for it, so be it, as long as the legislation that's going to help the least of these is what's getting through. And so I think where we can wind down the conversation, which is reflective in kind of where things stand, probably is just as it does in New York, as it does down here. Everything always comes down to the economy. But one thing that is painfully clear in the Sunshine State, as it is in the Empire State, the cost of living, specifically housing, rent, this is a crisis of epic proportions. For the very few, I assume, that are still in, the pre-war buildings and so on, that do have some form of rent control. Luckily enough for them that they do have that, but in New York, it never stops. The cost of living is completely out of control. Is there anything that's being done to mitigate that problem? We have of course, we have a very red legislature here in Florida. We have an amazing progressive fighter in Tallahassee named Anna Eskamani, who I'm sure you've heard of. We need more of those types of representatives that are not into the hyper-partisan politics and the jabbing back and forth. It's about the issues that really matter. What is being done, if anything, as it relates to the millennial and Gen Z generations who right now on paper are going to have very little, if any, chance to ever own a home for the rest of their life?
Yeah, I know what that feels like. I don't think I will ever be able to own a home, but I do think that what's important is that we know that there are solutions. So some things that I think are really great answers to some of the issues is actually federal. I think that we can make sure that there's more public housing. I think that we have seen other countries do amazing social housing, amazing public housing. Singapore, majority of their housing is public housing, right? For example. And I think that there's a lot of ways that we can do that. On the federal government side, there's a lot of answer there that we can actually have. And I think that at one point this was in the 90s, right? The Faircloth Amendment was one that made it so that there was a limited number across the nation of public housing that people could have, like, period, right? For some reason, it's only this number. And I mean, the population has grown exponentially, so there has to be some kind of reconsideration. This is what happens when we have, legislation that has become outdated, right? Or laws that have become not what they were intended for, right? And I think that, or have transformed into something that they're not intended for. And I think that, we need to make sure that, our government is helping to fund public housing. There was a huge divestment and disinvestment in public housing that should never have happened. And yet, we're here like looking at public housing, which used to be incredibly desirable housing here in New York. And, in Florida, people decimated that system, right? It's completely, gone. And so we've seen that happen in Chicago. We've seen that happen in so many other places. And in New York, we have this amazing, ability to be able to have public housing. And yet, we're not keeping it up. Like, we've seen people with mold in their roofs and lead paint that's just sitting there. And there's just a ton of things that are happening. I've walked into boilers with holes that I can physically walk into, right? Where, we are not doing what's right for people. And New York is probably one of the worst landlords on the face of the earth. Our state is the worst landlord. And I think that what we need to do is we need to make sure that federal funding is coming in, and state funding is still going in. And I think that, the state government, until we were able to actually get more of that funding through, and I think I was very pivotal in that, I think that it's really important that state also takes responsibility for its constituents, the people that live in it. And, the public housing residents are absolutely our responsibility. And I think that, if we are not having the federal government, the state government, and the city government helping to, kind of work on this issue, then and making sure that we have available public housing that people find desirable and enough units to actually help people to, we have literally on the list, we have so many names that for maybe 2 or 3 generations, we won't be able to actually go through them. That's how many people want public housing still. And that's how many people are needing housing in New York. We need to make sure that we are actually providing that housing. And affordable housing is great, but we need to make sure that it's permanently affordable and deeply affordable, right? And public housing is the only true affordable housing that we have.
So this is what I do for a living, kind of let people know.
Oh, is this a big reveal?
So I'm in commercial real estate. I am in the ultimate form of capitalism. And one thing I have learned since I've been doing this, especially when it comes to multifamily housing, is that you can choose to have a moral compass or not. It's a choice. You don't have to be a total, heartless capitalist, which a lot of people tend to be. I met somebody recently who does house sharing in Miami. And what ends up happening, of course, when you allow the private sector to completely control the outfit, it basically becomes this whole free-for-all of, well, I'm going to get mine, and that's just the way it is. And if people have to suffer for it, then that's okay. I can live with 4 people living in 1 bedroom as long as I'm getting my money. And so this is the reason why affordable housing is so important. It's also why having a completely upgraded infrastructure system, which New York City desperately needs in terms of public transportation, is what is so critical. Because if you were easily able to get to and from New York City in a reasonable amount of time, people can afford to commute from places like Dutchess County if that's what they wanted to do. But right now, they do not have that choice. You could be living in one borough and getting to the other borough could take 2 hours. So that's a big problem. And where this unlocks itself, I'm not 100% sure, but what I do know is that not all Democrats are created equal. I think we have to come to terms with that reality. A lot of times we're fighting off the GOP, but at the same time, it's like, you got to look in your own home too, and you got to see what's going on. And I think what you represent is very important. There is something to be said for those that are true bleeding hearts that really do care, that are not just doing this for the money. and you do represent the best of what it means to be a public servant. Now, before you go, I know you know who Roger Meadows is, so we got to pop up his question. Very important. New York State needs to be the next state to allow voters to place our own amendments on ballot for US 2, if I'm saying that right.
Ratify over there too, yeah.
Ratify New York State condemns drop the ball on all progressive bills. I've lost confidence in New York Dems. Give power to voters. Well, there's one thing that the state of Florida does have that I'm not sure the state of New York is anywhere close on, is we do have ballot initiatives, including 2 very big ones, which of course a lot of money is going to be thrown into the races because everybody, the consultant class, got to get paid. But you have Amendment 3, which is for legal cannabis, and Amendment 4, which is for codification of women's right to choose. So having those ballot initiatives, I think, will definitely motivate people to vote more so than they will if they want to vote red versus blue. Mm-hmm. What is the status in New York as far as those types of initiatives are concerned?
Oh, we do have ballot initiatives. Yeah, we do. And that's how we were able to pass through certain things when it came to, water or also with cannabis, et cetera. So there was definitely some initiatives.
There's one thing. Okay. So like I said, there are certain things that Florida does have that it may do a little better than New York does. New York has Florida 1,000-fold when it comes to clean drinking water. That is one thing I could never, ever take away from your state. That is one thing.
Can I tell you that is actually because of very, very, very thoughtful legislation to preserve the Catskills. Yes. It was a while back, but people took a really huge risk, and it was actually very, very bipartisan. I studied this a little bit because I felt like it was so important, but it was because a lot of people didn't want developers and people up there in the Catskills like ruining certain things. But the preservation of the water was so prescient, right? It was just incredibly prescient because, you can see that right now we have the ability to have this amazing water from the Catskills, and we wouldn't have had that, I think, if people sold it off or fracked it or something like that. I think that there's a lot of different things that we've seen other states do. So I still remember when I was in Washington State as a young intern, the very first time that I was looking at water rights, and the native water rights were the only thing that held for the Columbia River not to be sold to Coca-Cola and Dasani. Actually.
Holy Lord.
I kid you not.
Well, Nestle really loves the state of Florida, and we have to recognize.
I was about to say.
One of the most dangerous things that, the circumstances of which we're living in right now, and I do believe that RFK is going to have an impact on the general election. The one thing he is campaigning on, which I wish other people would do the same, and he has been 1,000% right on this from the very beginning, which is BlackRock. Again, this is all about private equity. And again, you live in the shadow of Wall Street, so whether it is BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, private equity controls our money. It basically, everything's facilitated through the likes of the Goldman Sachs of the world. We get that. But they are buying up all the single family homes in this country that they could get their hands on.
Yeah.
At some point, we're going to recognize that no one's going to be able to build generational wealth. And once everything becomes privatized, housing's privatized, water's privatized, our air is privatized, it doesn't matter whether it's the Democrats or the Republicans in power. Although you could argue that one side will just accelerate the demise even faster than the other side will. But at the end of the day, corporate special interests controlling our government, whether it is in New York City, Albany, or Capitol Hill, these are the things, much like in Florida, whether it is in the Fort Lauderdale area where I am, the state as a whole, or again, Capitol Hill, these are the things that we need to be focused on. And I do believe that what, like I said, you're fighting for is very similar to what I think a lot of people in this country are fighting for. We get distracted by the minutia of the things in politics that have no importance whatsoever. You don't like the way somebody presents themselves. You think that they're over woke or things like that. Who cares? Focus on the fact that people can't afford to put food on the table. Our air is dirty and our water is contaminated, and we have endless war. And that is something that we must fight on. And I believe with representatives like you and activist fighters like you on the ground, that is how that change for the better is going to happen. So I hope we can put our differences aside, and I hope 2 weeks from now we are looking at a substantially good result, because I do believe, and again, they're going to keep coming. We know that they will. But if AIPAC gets defeated in New York's 16th Congressional District, that is going to be a shot across the bow from a PR standpoint that I don't know how they're going to be able to withstand, because they are putting all their eggs in that basket. They didn't get Summer Lee. They didn't get Thomas Massie. They 1,000% want to knock off Jamaal Bowman, and they think they've got the guy to do it. I don't think so. I really do think that at the end of the day, I think with the hundreds, if not thousands of people that will be rallied around the city, that will be fighting to make sure. Yeah, I mean, listen, that's why I gotta send you down here to Florida at the end of July. I think if that does happen, I really do think that a very positive result in an otherwise dark time could happen right now. And I am so appreciative, as are many of our viewers. I know Jen is, of all the hard work that you do. You abso-freaking-lutely should be on Capitol Hill in New York's 10th district right now. I am not going to stop saying it. It is what it is. But I have no doubt you're going to land on your feet again real soon, and I hope to help you in that capacity when it comes about.
Thank you. Give Jen my best.
Definitely will. Yuh-Line, all the best. Let's bring it home for Jamaal and everybody else, and we'll be talking again real soon.
Yes, we got to go for Jamaal. Working Families Party. Let's go.
Appreciate you, my friend.
Bye.
Have a good night. So she is a lovely lady. Always enjoyed talking to her. Like I said, it was unfortunate that she is not sitting in the United States Congress right now. She should be. But that's the thing about politics. It will drive you insane. And it will also reveal just how depraved some people are willing to be for their own career. And as I've often said, what you must recognize with certain people that are trying to get into politics or in politics, it is always important to know, what is their background? Do they have a trade? Is there anything that they do that will allow them to succeed in this world without having to be dependent on the political system in order for them to live or to thrive? If they need the political system to do that, don't go near them, because it's not worth it. You cannot trust those types of individuals. They will 1,000% let you down at some point, which is why a lot of people thought that Mondaire Jones was somebody who was on their side. Listen, there was even people who thought Richie Torres was on their side. And as you have seen, don't work that way. And it doesn't matter that it just so happens that both Mondaire Jones and Richie Torres are black and gay. And they use those two things as a crutch to avoid scrutiny from the downright despicable behavior that they put forward, especially when it comes to the Israel lobby. There is no bridge that they will not cross in order for their own career to thrive. And if that means that they have to basically throw tons of people under the bus as a result, that's a huge part of it. And you know who really put themselves out there for that? John Fetterman. And as you guys know, I really, really don't like Bill Maher at all. I have, and as somebody who has admitted time and again that I used to be a frequent viewer of Bill Maher, there was a time where I was pretty devout. I watched him every week. I watched him with my parents when I was young, when he was just starting out on Real Time with Bill Maher. I used to watch Politically Incorrect, but I was really into when he was doing Real Time with Bill Maher when it started back in 2003. And I was very consistent. But what I can tell you is that whether he's changed or not, I know this. The Israel lobby is going to keep coming, and they're going to keep fighting. And it's going to get worse and worse and worse. But here's one of the reasons why. This is an interview that Bill Maher did on Friday night with John Fetterman. And needless to say, they make every excuse they possibly can make regarding why progressives are the ones that are wrong or bad. Yeah, I don't agree, but here we go.
I'm not a progressive, I'm a Democrat. What does that mean? What is that distinction? Because I don't think I've used the word progressive. I think I've said woke. I think there's a big difference between woke, and I know that word triggers a lot of people because it had a great beginning as a meaning, but words migrate, and it went to something else. I think there's a big difference between an old school liberal and a woke person. You say progressive Democrat. How do you describe this?
Yeah, no, I agree. It's like I've just say, and I've been saying that for years, actually. I said that, I didn't leave the label. It left me.
How did it leave you, Johnny boy? How did it leave you? I guess 25,000 dead women and children who have been massacred wasn't enough. And again, we're talking about numbers that we cannot quantify because we do not have full access via the free press. You know, journalists are being murdered by the IDF, right? I mean, you do know that. But this idea that he was somehow this masterful progressive, no. He used what he needed to use to his advantage for political cannon fodder, and it worked. That's all there is to it. He got himself into the United States Senate. Is it going to keep him there? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But he got there because he convinced people that he was the right option as a progressive. And of course, he was the lieutenant governor, and that name ID and being aware was a big part of why he was able to win. In this case, whenever he has an opportunity to show up the Free Palestine protesters, he's always decked out and tied very tight with his Israel flag, just as he was at the Florida Democratic Party gala in Orlando about a month ago. And of course, he did it with Wasserman Schultz cheering 4 more years right in front of the protesters who were basically trying to show him that he was wrong. Of course, what does he care? We'll continue.
That.
Right.
And that really, after it happened on October 7th, I was really knew that that whole progressive stack would be blasted apart, and there's not going to be any kind of way how the Democrats are going to be able to reply to that kind of, respond to that kind of. And I really decided early on that I believed that was going to be the right side with Israel throughout all of that. And I knew that would going to be Democrats would continue to peel away and kind of walk away from standing with Israel on that. But that's where I decided after.
How do you explain that, if you can, that the people who consider themselves the most liberal have abandoned Israel, which was always a liberal darling, for the people?
Abandoned Israel, which is always the liberal darling? It's occupied territory. You see, the thing about this particular issue that is becoming the most difficult to listen to, especially with the likes of Bill Maher and others, they still want to pretend that the Nakba didn't actually happen, that there were people that were killed over the course of many years. Does anybody know about the history of the USS Liberty? Or do people forget about that as well? You see, you have revisionist history, Bill Maher and John Fetterman. And it is amazing how wax poetic they want to be. As if to suggest that everything that they're talking about can't be refuted. And of course it can, but they don't care. And the reason they don't care is because they're still convinced that being on the side of the Israel lobby is where society is going to stay, and they want to remain in good standing with the powers that be. For the time being, in the short term, it's probably a good move. But in the long run, they will. John Fetterman and Bill Maher are two people in particular that are never going to live down their encouragement of this genocide. And they have actively supported what Israel is doing. Full stop.
Who a terrorist organization, the people who outwardly say they want a genocide, who outwardly are the one side of this who is against the two-state solution. Somehow they wound up with them. Why do you think that is? And will this split the Democratic Party?
Well, it does, because there's an appeal there, and I think you talk about that. Like last week, you really hit with the gender apartheid.
Yes.
And talking about a lot of these issues, and some of the most progressive and left parts of the Democratic Party are standing, for the kind of side that have kinds of organizations like Hamas or these kind of nations that there are no rights for.
It's as if they don't want to pretend that Gaza is an open-air prison. It's also true that they are just completely loose with the truth, as I like to say. And look, I know people are going to joke about the fact that Fetterman was in a car accident today. What matters to me is that he's a lousy representative, as are unfortunately most at the federal level. This is a big problem. This is a generational problem. The amount of bloodshed, the amount of trauma, it is beyond the pale at this point. And he sits there talking about what the real left is. No, look, the real left is the labor left. And the head of the UAW, Sean Fain, says that it is a genocide and he stands with the Palestinian people. That's what a real left, populist, progressive is all about. I don't know what the hell you think you are, and I don't know what the hell Bill Maher thinks he is, but whatever they are, I ain't that, and neither should anybody else be.
For women, and they certainly don't embrace the LGBTQ kinds of lifestyle. And then even in Philadelphia, the Queers for Palestine blocked the Pride parade in Philadelphia, and I never saw that on the bingo card.
See, this is the thing that I talked about with Yuh Line regarding where people just don't give a shit about politics anymore, because when you start talking about something like this, it's obvious that you do not have a winning talking point. You just revert to the woke language, the issues that end up becoming completely divisive. These are wedge issues that they're talking about. They have no real value in the political discourse. It's used as, again, it's just a crutch. Ooh, Palestinians don't like LGBTQ people. They don't persecute them. And Israel doesn't accept interracial marriage, interfaith marriage. That's a fact. But, pick one side and stick to it. And you'll keep getting your corporate special interest money to fund your career, because that's what he's hoping for. And that's the same thing that Bill is hoping for with the amount of money he makes every year working with HBO. That's how it works. There's no compass here. I don't believe in anything. This is just, again, this is the unveiling of the mask. This is where we are. It's a despicable set of circumstances in terms of where we stand today. And I could not be any more direct. And I thought that I was from the very beginning when this first went down. I didn't think it would get as bad as it did, but the truth is that the Zionist movement in some respects is in its death throes. They're never going to be able to walk this back. They're never going to be able to say it was justified. Never. And if you want to know what the ultimate moment in protest in American history may end up looking like, it's when Netanyahu shows up to speak on the congressional floor on July 24th. That's going to be big. And I do believe that that is going to have substantial repercussions, because everyone is going to flock to the nation's capital in protest. Maybe they'll get a 1 million person march. That'd be great. That's very funny, Double K. I think for Fetterman, it's a combination of two things. I think because he is such a giant of a man, he's about 6, I think he's like 6'9", 6'10". He wears clothes that are just comfortable for him. He's not just very tall, he's very wide as well. So you can imagine what it's like trying to wear a suit. It's not easy. So on that level, I do have some sympathy. But at this point, he's just basically a laughingstock. But I'll tell you a little bit of bright news, which I think you'll all appreciate. So for those of you who didn't actually get a chance to see exactly what happened this afternoon, it is very important to understand just how valuable Medea Benjamin and Code Pink are and the work that they do. I have been following Medea for a long time, and I think that the work that she has done, she and Jen have a great relationship, partnered up on a number of issues, especially for Julian Assange. But she has been someone today called her a demi-goddess, which I thought was funny. It was without question. She's had some great moments, but I happen to believe that her moment today was one of the very best, if not the best. She completely caught the Israel lobby off guard at this event, and it was as good as anything you're ever going to see. So hang on tight. This was really, really something.
Every person They are funding the millions of dollars that have gone to U.S. politicians. The blood is on your hands of the Palestinian people.
We care about all people. We want the hostages returned. That means we need an immediate ceasefire, and we need to stop killing Palestinians. Show that we care about the lives of the Palestinian people. AIPAC is desecrating Jewish values. We need to stop throwing money around to destroy the careers of politicians who only want to stop the killing. How does it feel to be somebody that is trying,
Oh my gosh. Stop the killing.
that is killing thousands and thousands of babies in Gaza? It is not right, and you know it's not right. We can't keep doing this. You can't keep destroying the lives of people, and you're destroying the American system by throwing the money around. By throwing around the money.
Stoic silence. And look at all of them. They don't care. These are the worst of the worst. You got this one guy over there with his arms folded like, yeah. You got this one guy here just being like, You got the pissed off woman in the middle with her hands folded. Colin, do me a favor. Grab that clip that off of Status Quo that was done earlier today with the Zionist who was confronting the rabbis. That was good.
I already have it added, actually.
I had a feeling you did. Just wanted to make sure. But you can see the look of disdain on their face. They're not even listening. They're basically doing everything in their capacity to tune out what's being said. They just don't want to know because they have their ideology and they're sticking to it. We'll continue.
AIPAC kills the blood of the Palestinian people are on your hands.
You're all a bunch of genocidal freaks, is what you are. You are all murdering Palestinians. Shame on every single one of you. Bunch of genociders.
Destroying our democracy, throwing money around.
See this guy right here with money around? See, he heard him say, you're all a bunch of genocidal freaks, and all he did was laugh and smirk like, The problem is that they're just so damn used to everything going their way. They are, without question, used to this unsightly behavior. They just don't care. It doesn't bother them. They are completely content with who they are. You have to keep rubbing it in their face, Metal, because it's the truth. Make them feel uncomfortable because that's how they feel right now. They don't like when the commoners invade the palace fortress. They don't like it. They don't want to know that these people exist. They see themselves as more important and, frankly, more valuable than. That's how they see it. Everything's measured in dollars and cents when it comes to the pecking order of this particular society. They do not care. If tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people have to die for their cause, that's how it has to be.
To destroy the careers of people who only want to stop the killing, the slaughter, the genocide. It is genocide, whether you believe it or not. It is genocide that is happening. How can you watch the slaughter? 4 hostages released, that's good. But it was 274 Palestinians killed. Doesn't that break your heart? Don't you think there's some
Doesn't break their heart. They're heartless. Bunch of.
Correct. They're heartless. They don't care. And I know that Medea is doing this and she's pouring her heart and soul into it, and it's one of her finest moments, and it's going to get better. But you have to understand that it doesn't matter. Jewish lives are more important than Palestinian lives. They just are. Sorry if you don't want to hear it, but that's what they believe. That's why if you start noticing some of the messages that are thrown out there, they're very clear in what they believe. They believe that they're superior.
Genocidal freaks. AIPAC is a death cult. Bunch of killers. Shame on every single one of you. Shame on every single one of you. Bunch of genocidal freaks.
Come on, bro.
Palestine will be free. I promise you that.
The blood of the Palestinian people are on your hands. AIPAC does not speak for us, even if they are funding and own our government.
Stop supporting genocide.
Stop supporting genocide.
Stop supporting genocide. You're desecrating Jewish values. You're destroying U.S. democracy. You're killing thousands of children. Shame on you.
Proud of yourself?
Are you?
Very much so.
Okay,
I get to stand up for my people that you're
Where's your
fucking
guy?
murdering.
The lobby right now?
You fucking genocidal piece of shit.
Yeah.
Hey,
Hey,
what?
I'm bringing them to the lobby.
You want to
right
defend
now,
those
so-
people? You really want to defend those people?
Alright,
You got to know who you're defending.
Yeah. Well, you want to...
You're defending a death cult that's murdered my family. They murdered hundreds of my family.
I bet you it did affect that black man. I bet you it did. Because he knows. And one of our fellow conservatives gets it. That was definitely assault. You can't put your hands on people just because you want them to leave or don't like their opinions. Being trespassed doesn't also mean you must be assaulted. It's because they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear it. It affects them in a visceral way because it goes against what they believe is correct. And the problem is that they have lived in a bubble their entire life. They have been able to get away without having to face consequences for their privileged lives where they are never challenged. Jen has said it before. Being raised as a Zionist, you are only amongst Zionists. You push out the rest of the world. They don't exist. Which is why they go to camp in places like the Catskill Mountains in New York. So they're only around their own. They don't ever want to know that there are outsiders, and they are told that they are the chosen people, which means they're better than everybody else. They can get away with these things. They do not have to face consequences for what they do. It's why they're so brazen about it. And if you think that's bad, oh boy. But let me tell you, that was an amazing job by Medea Benjamin and her group. They did themselves good on that one. That was as good as anything I've ever seen them do. But it gets even more interesting. So there was a protest in New York today, and this is what happens. Of course they can, Metal. Of course they can. Keep telling yourself that they can't, because that's what the corporate special interests want you to believe. Of course the Palestinians and the Jews can live together. They did so for hundreds of years. But it gets better. This is a Zionist and couldn't be more of a definitive Ashkenazi telling rabbis that they're fucked up, that they're a Jew betrayer, etc., etc. We'll play.
We come from Israel. Our people come from Israel.
You are not a Semite. You are Ashkenazi. You are white as a ghost. You are not native to the Middle East, no matter how much you think you are. Even if you have ancestors that were born there or settled there, it's more like it. And that's what happened. You are not native to the Palestinian land, which is now called Israel. But she's letting it go real quick, giving away the game.
Zionism is a political movement which is causing bloodshed. It is a bloodshed. That's where our family is from, like from Israel. How can you hold that flag? This is because the action.
Now, she only went back maybe a generation or two. All right, we'll say two. Say 2 generations. She will discover that her family is not actually from there. But maybe she knows that already. What do you think? You think she knows? You think she's crying her crocodile tears because of the insulated world that she grew up in, and now it's shattering all around her? She doesn't know what to believe. She just believes that everybody's an anti-Semite. When you see your own rabbis saying that this is a genocide and that is Palestinian land, it literally rips her in half because she doesn't know what to think. She just thinks everybody hates the Jews. But when you see your own saying it, now you got to question everything, whether you want to or not. But there is no question that she is internally unraveling, doesn't know what to do.
Of the Zionist people, they are responsible for the bloodshed. We lived in a beautiful peace. We lived in a beautiful peace with Palestinian people for hundreds of years.
Right there, Metal. There you go. You want to take the rabbi's word for it? Because I will. And you better believe that look ain't a joke. That's a lifestyle. This particular style of Judaism has been passed down for century upon century upon century. And if anybody knows, it's them. The Jews and the Palestinians have lived peacefully in the Middle East prior to 1948 for century upon century upon century. And those particular Jews are native to the Middle East. Not this lady. Probably isn't very good if she goes out into the sun for very long. But apparently this is where her family's from.
You're saying that you're not a Jew! You're not a Jew! How dare you!
When Zionism
You're
came
not a
in,
Jew!
when
Say
Zionism
that!
came in,
You're not a Jew. I have a feeling, I could be wrong, but I have a feeling that this gentleman knows the Talmud backwards and forwards, all of the teachings of the Jewish faith inside and out, can recite it just as those who can quote the Bible, and this woman doesn't know jack shit. I'm willing to make a bet on that. Just a thought. Capture that image, ladies and gentlemen. Look at this image. This is everything. In fact, Colin, screenshot it if you can. Zionist, Palestinian supporters, and an actual Jewish person. The rage they feel is all predicated on the fact that their existence, while extremely affluent, is extremely sheltered. And I've been around it. I've been around people like her. There were people like her on my mother's side of the family who believe that they are ethnically and religiously superior. Now, I don't believe they are. I don't believe anybody is. But for them, that's what they believe. And it is a indoctrinated form of ideology that is very prevalent amongst the affluent. This is not common, generally speaking, amongst those that are not. Working class Jews do not share that same sentiment, at least as far as I've been able to observe. But this is pretty crystal clear where they're at.
they caused bloodshed. They caused rivers of bloodshed.
How can you say that? You're
You're Jewish! How can you cheat your own people? Who is a Jew? We're Jews! This is our people!
We're all Jews here.
He was against Judaism.
We're all Jews here. All right?
Yeah, so how are they saying that?
Because they believe in God.
Jewish, I'm standing here.
I don't want that.
That's our country.
And the Talmud says it's not our country like that.
That is our country. How dare you say that about our own people? What's wrong with you? Fuck you!
Prime example of that indoctrination of the worst kind. First says it's our country. It isn't. Then she gets enraged to the point in which she physically assaults this man and does it thinking that she can just get away with it. There is not a thought in her mind that she could ever get arrested, ever get reprimanded, ever. She's angry. I'm hurt. I can do whatever I want. That's how she thinks. That's the danger. And that's why they are so ready, willing, and able to send hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians to their death. She is grateful for the state of Israel killing the people she believes are trying to kill her people. Justified homicide. And she's got that bloodlust running through her veins if I've ever seen it.
Genocide! This is not what Jews was standing for! Shame, shame! You guys are monsters! Shame on you!
Now, I can't tell if this is her husband, if this is her companion, if this is, again, I don't want to stereotype, but with all of the Madonna bling, he could be gay. But this is a person who clearly was giving them the finger as well. This is, again, I don't know what she would have done further, but as you can see, and this is just done in a regular town square. I don't know where in New York. It looked like it was Midtown for a second. I couldn't tell. In this case, you have somebody who's being dragged away because she clearly may have ended up doing something that she would have regretted really bad. And the best part is, and the thing you should all take away from this clip, is the fact that no one was aggressive to her. She was extremely hostile, and it could have gotten really bad. Now, of course, what is she capable of doing? She isn't capable of doing much of anything, if nothing else. But that is the importance of the side that is trying to push forward real fundamental change in our foreign policy. You must not react. You can't. She basically has to be allowed to do this. And the reason being is it's only going to take a few instances, which is why what is so inspiring about the Free Palestine movement is the fact that unbelievably, it's as if everybody understands the score and understands the level of discipline that they have to put forward to make sure that this does not fail. And that is the best part of this. She wanted to hit those rabbis, but she at least knew not to do that, but she hit that guy who she didn't know was a Jew. And then he flashed his Star of David right at her, said, "No, I'm a Jew too." And it's like her head was going to explode. It's like, this can't be. Our people have to stick together so we can subjugate everybody else. It's how we've led. It's how we've controlled all of this for so very long. Yeah, guess what? It's not going to last. It's just not. Your crocodile tears, nobody cares. It doesn't matter. You've already lost. It's just a matter of when it's officially going to sink in. And that's only one part of the equation. Thank you, Henry. Good to know. As you guys have known for a long time, Thomas Massie is there's no such thing as favorite. He just happens to be the congressional representative that, for the most part, I have the most respect for on the Hill. Because I do believe that as much as anybody that is serving in Congress today, he has a certain level of integrity that pretty much nobody else does. And he has voted with progressives on a number of key issues many times, and he's been the lone Republican who's done it. We need more Thomas Massies on Capitol Hill in the rural conservative parts of the United States. That's who we need. And the ironic thing is, he is the best GOP representative, and you can make the argument that Mitch McConnell, Mitch McConnell from Kentucky, I'm probably the worst representative on Capitol Hill. Come on, Kentucky, what are you doing? Institutional politics is the worst kind. That's probably the biggest part of this problem. It's being able to fight that off. But we've got a number of topics here that we're going to cover. As you know, he did an interview with Tucker Carlson. I've seen a little bit of it, but this is going to be a real treat because you're going to get an idea of what a person who is on the political right believes. And this is what is truly in his heart and in his head, because he is not bought and paid for by corporate special interests, and he don't even meet with lobbyists. So here we go. On the U.S. debt.
Does it end?
Right now, we're able to finance it because we're the world's reserve currency.
Right.
And when we print more money, which we're doing all the time, the Fed is doing that, we're actually taxing the world. Everybody in the world who holds dollars gets like a 3% transaction fee. I say we're kind of like the credit card at the gas station that gets 3% because you're using that credit card.
Right.
Well, we get 3% from inflation we cause because the world is using our currency. And we can do that as long as they use our currency. But I think it's going to end at some point. They're going to quit using our dollars as reserve currency. I mean, I watched your interview with Putin, and one of the things, whether you hate him or not, one of the things he said that is true is when we sanctioned him, before we sanctioned Russia, 70% of their transactions were in US dollars. And after the sanctions, it's less than 20% of their transactions are in US dollars.
That is okay. So there's a lot to unpack here, but the most important thing that Massie did say, which I agree with 1,000%, is that the sanctions on Russia have completely backfired on our country. And this is what happens when you are in support of endless war, which Russia isn't, and neither is China. I'm not trying to take away the value of other nations around the world, but let's be honest, it basically comes down to our three countries, much as it was written in 1984, in 1949, and very little has changed. The same rules apply. There's three mega powers around the globe. We're one of them. Russia's another. China's the other. And we basically control all these little proxies in between. There's some independent nations like Australia and Japan, and even Germany to an extent, that do pretty well for themselves. And you could even throw the UK in there if you want. But the truth is, and Brazil is obviously up and coming. A lot of these nations are kind of dependent on those three global superpowers. can make the argument for India. But right now, we are the world's reserve currency. Now, I wish Steve was here to comment, regarding this whole theory about printing money. Now, what I've always said, which I think is important, when it comes to this concept of printing money, it's not actually going to the printing shop and printing dollars. That's not what this is. The problem is that it's basically like, think of like a hose and it's being choked and very little water, if any, is getting out. What's ultimately happening is that it's only being circulated to a very small area, which is usually the people who control most of the money and the power. By doing that, the money does not filter throughout society, and it's why the dollar has been devalued. When only a small portion is getting to control the pie, how else can you possibly balance it? And as I've often said, this has as much to do with anything as it relates to the fact that we do not have a substantial labor movement in this country right now. It's why people like Wasserman Schultz are still getting support from the heads of these labor unions. When you don't have this robust labor movement, what you end up getting is corporate special interests dominating the entire system. It's why rent can't be controlled. It's why private equity owns all the homes, is also getting their hands on our drinking water. It's why fracking is being permitted in this country, even though it clearly does so much more harm than it does good for the purpose of energy extraction, whether it is the man-made earthquakes, whether it is the water contamination, whether it is the contaminated soil. And the communities are not benefiting from the energy extraction. And that's just one example. There's plenty of others that could be given. But this idea that it's this whole idea that we can't print money, that's not true. That's not how it works. I don't get the feeling that that's entirely what Massie was saying, but I do understand where he's coming from. I get it. We are a country that when it comes to and this is where libertarian conservatism is growing leaps and bounds. We are a wasteful spending nation. And nowhere do we waste more money than on the military-industrial complex. That's the ultimate. That's more wasteful spending if there ever was. We'll finish it out on this clip of the U.S. debt.
So what we're doing with all these sanctions, ironically, we're shooting ourselves in the foot every time we sanction a country and say you can't use our currency to have a transaction. We're taking away our ability to charge them 3% for that transaction, because when we print 3% more dollars, we're just taking that money.
Massie, Tucker definitely has the best facial expressions, that is for sure. But I will tell you, the thing about Massie, which is so interesting, is that he is an incredibly intelligent guy. Like he's like Mensa smart. He's at that level. He's also a person who lives off the grid. His entire, I don't know if his home is a compound, but he lives in Northeast Kentucky. The dollar goes a lot further there. So needless to say, he probably can live off of $174,000 a year on a government salary. That's not as easy for people in a lot of other parts of the United States, but for him, that's probably very doable. And so there is a truth to be told about the fact that there are other up-and-coming nations like BRICS right now that are going to figure out a way to get away from the US dollar. And when that happens, no amount of MMT is going to help us, because what nations are trying to do is avoid doing business with us if they can get away with it. And what's happening in Gaza is accelerating that. It is accelerating other nations around the world from saying, if there is any way that we can get away from the United States, we're in. Now, they're not there yet, and it may still take a lot of time, but we are heading down a very dangerous road right now with our foreign policy positions. The way we are antagonizing Russia with Ukraine, and the way that we are going full bore in a genocide in the Middle East, in Israel. Without question, this is just one of many. And That's not even the coup de grace. The coup de grace is if we have the audacity to go into the South China Sea and get involved with Taiwan against China. That's the end. That's the true end game if we're going to go there. Will it happen? I don't know. But hopefully enough people are starting to get very concerned about that fact. I know I'm concerned. And I do think that if anybody has had the audacity to try to stand up to this, at least on the GOP side, it's Thomas Massie when it comes to voting against Israel, which he talks about right here.
Last month, we voted like 15 or 16 times on issues related to Israel. And, you know, I've been hit because I voted no on all of those.
Why do you, because you hate Israel, or is there another reason?
No, because I'm against sending our money overseas. I'm against starting another proxy war. I'm against sanctions because it's going to weaken the dollar. I'm for free speech. Like, all of these resolutions run afoul of those things. And that's why I can't vote for them.
I like how Tucker admits that he is, I don't know if he's spectrum autistic or whatever it is, but he's admitted that, and he's admitted as much. I love how he's such a pot stirrer. He's just, he can't help himself. He's like, what, do you hate Israel? Is that what it is? And we all know he's messing around, but it is interesting to watch him do that.
Tell us about the free speech part of it.
So recently they brought a bill to Congress, and this was actually a binding bill, not a non-binding resolution. Like, this was going to have the effect of law, and people would get, you know, prosecuted if they engaged in anti-Semitism on campuses. And the problem with this bill is they use some international definition of anti-Semitism on a website somewhere. My first question is, why don't you just put the definition in the bill? Why are you pointing to somebody's URL in a piece of legislation?
You are the Congress, right?
Right. We are the
Congress. The laws.
We should be. Instead, we're referencing a website that's not even, you know, hosted in the United States.
It goes to show you just how powerful the lobby truly is. Extremely powerful. Great to hear, Mario. I heard Jen's a pretty nice person on the phone. That I've heard. But because Massie has had the audacity to challenge the Israel lobby, his most recent election had AIPAC throwing over $400,000 in negative advertising against him. We'll talk about that here.
So what's AIPAC?
AIPAC is the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. And they didn't start out as a PAC in the sense of a political action committee, but now they have a political action committee. Ostensibly, it's a group of Americans who lobby on behalf of Israel. They're for anything Israel. And they're a very effective lobbying group. They get in there. They try to get me to write a white paper as a candidate, for instance, for Congress. They almost get
on what?
On Israel. Like, and I wouldn't do it. And they said, why? And I'm like, I don't do homework for lobbyists, right?
Why can't every fucking representative on Capitol Hill say what Thomas Massie just said? I don't do homework for lobbyists. I don't take your money. I don't answer to you. And the problem, of course, is that we do not have a system that brings in the best kind of people. Massie does talk in the interview about how he, in some ways, kind of slipped into Congress. If they had any idea that he was going to be like this, if he got in, you better believe they would have moved heaven and earth to stop him. No question about it.
I didn't like writing term papers at college. I'm not writing one for you.
What did they say?
They said, oh, well, here, just copy Rand Paul's term paper and put your name on it. We'll accept that. And I'm like, no, I'm still not cribbing somebody else's homework to do homework. I'm not turning in my homework for you. And what you're laughing, but you know what? I bet I may be the only Republican in Congress who hasn't done homework for AIPAC.
If there is anybody who should replace, if there's anybody who's going to replace me once I'm no longer in the United States Senate, it's definitely Thomas Massie. Not that Mitch McConnell would want Thomas Massie to replace him, but if there is a congressional representative who should be in the upper chamber that's on the political right, imagine replacing Mitch McConnell with Thomas Massie. Now that would be a welcome change in our political arena, not just the GOP. We'll continue.
And it's just what it is. It's conditioning. They want you to do something very simple and benign, and for them, they don't really grade your term paper. They just want to know that you'll do something for them. And if you'll do something for them as a candidate, you're more likely to do something for them as a congressman when you get in there. So my rift started out in 2012 when I refused to turn in an Israel term paper.
And how did they respond to that?
Well, they kind of got in my race a little too late there in the beginning, and because it was hard to tell that I was actually going to win. And when they saw I was going to win, that's when they tried to get me to do the term paper.
What I find interesting is that it's not just that they disagree with your views, which they do, and I think they have an absolute right to disagree with anybody's views. We all do. But they've called you a bigot, and they call you an anti-Semite and say you're a hater and try to destroy your character. That seems like a very different level of response to me.
Right. There's no need to do that. I'm not anti-Semitic. I don't have an anti-Semitic hair in my head. Okay. I mean, I don't like AIPAC anymore. Like, I used to be neutral toward AIPAC, right? But I have no antagonistic feelings toward Jewish people. I am the last thing. I think I'm probably the least xenophobic person in Congress. I mean, these are the guys that my colleagues want to sanction everybody, declare them terrorist states, come up with these strongly worded resolutions. I don't vote for any of that crap, right? Unless somebody does harm to me, I'm not going to call them anything. So I get called names just for staying out of all of this political posturing.
That's disgusting, though, isn't it?
I guess
attack your character. They can disagree with your views, right. but to call you like the worst thing you can be in America, like, that's disgusting.
I have a thick skin.
He may have a thick skin, but there's one thing that Massie did there that I don't agree with. Don't apologize. You have nothing to apologize for. You stood up to one of the most powerful political lobbying groups in the world, and you survived fairly easily. So did Summer Lee. I do believe if Jamaal Bowman survives in New York, that's going to really make things interesting between Jen and Wasserman Schultz. I think people are sick of this shit, and they should be. We should be sick in general of our federally elected representatives, especially, who do not have term limits, getting away with this shit. This is one of the reasons why our country is going straight to hell, and has been for a long time. Which is why, even if there are things that you disagree with Massie on, just know he is an ally, whether you believe it or not. He is not bought and paid for by this system. That's the baseline. That is the baseline, should be for everybody. With few exceptions. Few exceptions. Do you think that I would take Nancy Pelosi over Thomas Massie? Do you think I would take Eric Swalwell over Thomas Massie? Do you think I would take Debbie Wasserman Schultz over Thomas Massie? Would you? I don't think so. If you actually gave a shit. But as we know, the tribalism within our political system is a big problem. But if there's one thing I truly respect and admire about Thomas Massie, he is somebody who did not support the Green New Deal. He's been dead set against it, and he has his reasons. Because the bill itself is not an environmental bill. It's a whole bunch of stuff. And he is somebody who is very crystal clear that if you're going to do this, you have to, without question, understand what it means to live environmentally clean. He is somebody who lives off the grid. And that's where we're going to end the clip of this interview with Tucker Carlson. It is quite extraordinary. For somebody who thinks that he doesn't care about the environment, he cares as much as anybody.
The house off the grid. It runs on a wrecked Model S Tesla battery. It's been running continuously for 6.5 years.
So you built the house? Like, who built the house?
I did. We had an ice storm and a lot of trees fell down.
How big is the property?
It's 1,500 acres.
And
that's pretty insane. With that said, Massie obviously has done very well for himself. However, 1,500 acres in Northeast Kentucky. If I remember correctly, and I could be wrong, but I believe that Massie lives in represents the most rural district in the United States.
An ice storm and a lot of trees fell down.
How big is the property?
It's 1,500 acres.
And it's wooded.
It's almost all woods. And it's too steep. I don't want you to think this is like valuable Iowa.
No. I know the part of the state you're in.
Pack your lunch if you're on the ridge and you fall off the ridge, because you're going to be hungry by the time you get to the bottom. You're going to be grabbing like tree roots and stuff to keep from sliding. But it grows trees, and some of it is flat and, in the bottom.
But this is not plantation land.
No, these are hollers.
Yeah.
So, in fact, interestingly enough, it's been a Republican county since the Civil War, even though all the counties around it have been Democrats since the Civil War.
Because of the geography.
Yes. The topography did not allow for consolidation of farms.
That's right.
So there was no scale at which slavery made sense. You basically, in your holler, you only had enough land that your family, if you had enough kids, could farm.
Yes.
And so that's the way people grew up. And by the way, it's kind of libertarian. I'll do my thing in my holler. You do your thing in your holler.
That's right.
If you need some help, let me know. I'll come over and help you. But
Southwest Virginia's like this. West Virginia's like this.
Yeah.
Because of the topography.
Right. It's the reason West Virginia was Republican and seceded from Virginia. So, by the way, half my family's from West Virginia and half my family's from Kentucky. My mammal's, who's 97 right now, is still alive. Her grandfather was a Union soldier.
Amazing.
Isn't that crazy?
From West Virginia.
From West Virginia, yeah. She still lives in West Virginia. But
that's pretty amazing. Just have to point that out. We're really not that far removed when you really think about it from so much of history. We're really connected in a lot of ways. It's pretty amazing.
We're not that far away from the Civil War.
No, I know. How did you know how to timber frame?
I found a class on eBay for $500 in Tennessee, and I bought it now. And I drove to Tennessee and took a 1-week class, and we built a little shed/cabin, and I called my wife from a payphone, and I said, I want to do this. Instead of going to get a job, we had just left our company after 10 years of working there, and we'd moved back to Kentucky. And I said, well, I'll just build a timber frame house.
Full time?
Yes. Woke up every morning, had my coffee, and started chiseling away or going up in the woods and dragging more trees out that had fallen down.
So you built your house full time, as a job every day.
And this is what our kids saw too.
Honestly, how could you not love this guy? I'm sorry, but how could you not? Let me tell you something. When the shit really hits the fan, that's the compound you want to be on, because that's where you'll survive.
The flooring for our kitchen came out of the creek. We call it a crick.
What do you mean the flooring came out of the creek?
There are rocks in the creek that are flat, that they look like the stuff you buy at Lowe's that's fake. And I'm like, oh, this is what they modeled the fake stuff after. It's free. Let's just go pick it up.
That was a bad freeze frame at the end, but hey, you get the point. He is the best representative in the GOP. I don't think it's close. And I believe, listen, there's heavy talk of him running for president in 28. What I do believe, I think Thomas Massie's message is extremely important. I hope it gets out there, because there is a overwhelmingly significant portion of this country that will never touch the Democratic Party, and I don't blame them. But what I do believe is that there is the right type of conservatism that makes sense. This is the right type of conservatism. Thomas Massie represents that in many ways. And so by that measure, I think, number one, as I said, you hear me now, quote me later, I do believe he is going to take over in the United States Senate for Mitch McConnell in the next election cycle. I want to say, I believe his election is in 26. So yeah, it would not surprise me in the least, because I am pretty sure that McConnell is not running again, although I could be wrong. Who the fuck knows at this point with him? That man, he's another one. He's another crypt keeper that'll be there till he's dead, because we don't have term limits. I do believe that he's going to make a run for the upper chamber. It's going to happen. It's just a question of when. Do I think Massie would ever run for president? I don't know. I mean, he could. I don't. I mean, I would say that 28 would be too soon if he was a United States senator, but you never know. In this day and age, you just don't know. And the fact that the changes in the GOP are happening so dramatically, and don't forget, Thomas Massie has basically told Trump more times than not. Now, granted, Massie also has supported DeSantis for president. So he's not perfect. He does make mistakes. He is not without his flaws. But overall, yeah, he's the embodiment of what a true, uncorrupted conservative representative should be. And he represents his people well. Because with all that AIPAC money that they threw at him, he still won over 75% of the vote. Did a good job. And clearly, the people like him a lot. He would probably be up there with Bernie Sanders in terms of the highest rated representatives if they did that. That's more of what we need. What we need less of is where we will end the show tonight. Debbie Wasserman Schultz was the guest speaker in a very working class community that is in the congressional district that I attended this evening. It's only about 20 people in the room, but I wanted to hear what she had to say. I mean, Jen is running against her. Got to know what she's saying on the campaign trail. What I will tell you is that she is, without question, somebody who either is intentionally condescending towards people of color, or unintentionally. Either way, I was one of two white people in the room, and one was me and the other was her. It's just there to listen and observe. Wasn't there to cause trouble. I don't do that. Basically, everything that came out of the Congresswoman's mouth is about how bad the GOP is and how you have to keep supporting me, because otherwise the GOP is going to come and get you. So you gotta, for the 12th time, 12 times? Okay, whatever, something like that. You gotta elect me again to Congress because I'm doing a great job. Oh, and Debbie wants you to know that nobody fights harder for legislation to prevent people from drowning. Like that's her thing. She comes to these things, and everything is framed from the perspective of, let me rattle off the statistics that I can think of that is going to make me look good in a room of mostly, older Black voters, completely discounting any of the realities of today. Completely discounting all of it. Talked about Donald Payne, who died of diabetes, mentioned statistically how bad that is. She, of course, talked about her breast cancer. Got to mention that. Very important. Get the shingles vaccine. That's another one. $35 a month for insulin, which, of course, the president didn't really have much to do with on that one, but let it slide. went after Byron Donalds, didn't go after him by name, bringing up this whole idea about slavery. And yes, a lot of bad shit comes out of the mouths of people like Byron Donalds regarding how slavery used to be. But I got to tell you, Debbie, you do not support the policies that these communities desperately need that would make their lives better. For example, you do not support universal health care. Now, I would have been inclined to say something, but I felt, what the hell? The reaction in the room, Jimmy, is most people don't know any better. But I'll get to that in a minute. The coup de grace was when I caught her in a big fat lie, because there was a good gentleman in the room who decided to question her. His name is Jonathan, very active member of the community. Just so you know, for those of you who don't know, Debbie does sit on the Appropriations Committee. They get 15 earmarked projects per year, per congressional term. Didn't say how much capital is allocated. But what she did do was get a question regarding reparations. And I've got video footage of it. And she lied. First of all, she didn't say that she supports reparations because, of course, she doesn't. But that's neither here nor there. She said that the reason why we have to be very careful regarding reparations is the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court. Last I checked, reparations is a legislative bill about allocating capital into certain communities that never get it. That's basically what it is. And if there's a community that could definitely use the support, it's a community like the one I was in this evening. I will not, for obvious reasons, I will not name it. But the point is, she not only does not say the word support of reparations, much like she doesn't ever say the word Palestine, because that doesn't exist in her vernacular, but she also wanted the people in the room to believe that it's the Supreme Court that decides the legislation regarding reparations. That is not true. This is a legislative bill, and it does have to pass Congress, but as we all know, the only thing that the Democratic Party establishment has ever attempted to do is write legislation that studies reparations. Hey, there was really nothing in there that would have prevented her from just saying, oh, yes, well, if there was an opportunity, I would totally support it. No, she won't do it. Just like she won't support healthcare, just like she supports endless war, especially a genocide against the Palestinian people, because she's taken over $1 million from AIPAC. I'm tired of seeing this person tokenize the Black community as badly as she does, and has done it for multiple decades. So when the meeting was over, or when we were to go, people in the room were able to converse and chat, and we did. And I went up to as many people as I could and let them know about Jen. I also let them know that Debbie was lying about reparations, which she was. So maybe it'll take. I don't know. I can hope. But if you are not currently signed up to volunteer, we need as much help as we can get. Now, you're going to see me out there all the time canvassing. Gotten a few friends to agree to come out. We need a hell of a lot more. We need as many boots on the ground as we can get. Because if you really want fundamental change, you got to put your money where your mouth is. You got to put the work in. It's absolutely necessary. It's the only way that change can happen. You want it to happen? Be like me. Be like Jen. Be like all of us. Fundamental change is possible. Metal, that's definitely one way. But I could tell you one of the ways that we could do that right now is supporting Jen against Wasserman Schultz. You're talking about taking one of the worst AIPAC recipients in all of Congress and replacing it with somebody who actually not only says genocide, but tells AIPAC that I'm going to fight to turn you into a foreign agent if I get to Capitol Hill. Now, that's the type of representative you want on Capitol Hill. Somebody that actually could work with Thomas Massie. And you better believe that Massie would work with Jen to get a bill passed that says that AIPAC has to be registered as a foreign agent, which they should, because that's what they are. That's what it's all about, baby. That's what these fights are about. The whole red-blue thing, it doesn't matter if the person in question sucks royally. Tony, thank you again. That really means a lot. Double K, we love you, as you know. And Roger, New Yorkers do not have the right to place their own initiatives on a ballot. Only legislatures. So when we ratify, we're ratifying your initiative, not ours. So in other words, it isn't as good as Florida. Interesting. Double K, thank you again. And Roger, Fetterman said during campaign he's not a progressive. You know what? I think you're right. I think he did say that. Who would have known that he was going to turn into what he turned into? I don't think anybody could have anticipated that. But here we are. So, hope you enjoyed. For Thursday night, we're hoping to get a really awesome Free Palestine contributor. I'm hoping to bring back either Miko Peled or Omar Badar, but you'll be hearing from somebody good. Cross fingers. I'll be working on that. These days, I tell you, it's a lot of hard work. And until, or at least for the next 11 weeks, it's going to be a grind, a real grind. But I'm looking forward to it. I believe in Jen. I believe in this movement. I think we could do a lot of good. And remember, if you are considering helping out, this is a website that you can go to where that help can be provided. Appreciate you, Ghislaine. So why don't you go over there and help out however you can? Boots on the ground is the #1 recommendation of assistance that we need. So think about it. Much appreciated. I think we've had a pretty diverse crowd. We've had a pretty big crowd tonight. It's been really good. Make sure you smash that like button. Make sure you subscribed. Make sure you click that bell. Make sure as soon as this live stream is finished, you get right onto the YouTube channel. Make sure that like is left and make sure you leave a comment. If you enjoyed the show, that's going to help boost the algorithm more and more people will see this live stream. And who knows, maybe we'll get some more subscribers. Maybe we'll get some more volunteers. You never know. Smash that like button, share, subscribe, do all those things that we ask you to do. We appreciate you more than you know. Chris Garrett, Travers, Jimmy Zim Zam, Metal, Ghislaine, Tony, Mario, Bass Chad Thunderjock, always a good name. Who am I forgetting? Who did we miss? Henry Kajawa, great to see you as always. Ray J, always great to have you here. Teddy Cool, really appreciate you being here. Jen Perlman, thank you for coming. Who else? Donald James, Rogant, Richard. Good point. The hegemony is one issue. The other primary is the U.S. engages in global rent extraction and its high-value commodities. And unfortunately, yes, China continues to catch up. And that's what they do. Unfortunately, we are a little off the rails. You don't like my music? Always good to have you here. Let's see. Who else? Michael Brown, thank you. I did not know that the lady losing her mind was in Union Square. Sable, yes. I think that may have been the knockout punch. Nitram Case, great to have you here. There's Teresa. I hadn't seen you in the chat. I appreciate you coming on. Yes, but no. And let's see, who else we got? Travers. I think I said to Travers. I'm not 100% sure if I did or not, but I can always say to my Irish, you always come back for seconds. So I'll say it the second time. I think that's all she wrote. I believe that's all she wrote. And of course, Roger Meadows, double K, can never say it enough. Your support of the channel means a lot. All of you guys doing the amazing work that you do. Colinello, thank you for checking in early. For anybody that I may have forgotten, if I did, I don't think I did. I think I got you all. But remember, smash that like button, share, subscribe, do all those things that we ask you to do. Appreciate each and every one of you equally. See you Thursday.